Have you had many complaints about the tax audit system?
I haven't directly, John, and since I've been here in Newcastle in the last 6 months, at public forums, I've made the comment, if you've got any problems with it, get in contact with me direct. I've only had one person contact me in all that time.
Would you admit that in the past some of your tax auditors may have been overly aggressive when dealing with small business?
What's happened is we've moved our people from an inside operation to an outside operation. We've recognised we had to do a lot of training with that to equip them in terms of negotiation, communication. We've done that. Some people mightn't have been the right types. I think we've rounded the corner in that respect, and they may not be in the audit scene now. Plus we've got ongoing training. So I think we're doing a lot internally to overcome any deficiencies that might have been there.
You admit to some deficiencies in the past?
Well, naturally, in terms of a large number of people moving from one sphere of work to another, there could have been people who weren't suited to that role.
What sort of powers do your auditors have? The perception is that they have very wide-ranging powers. Is that true?
No, well, when we do an audit, we enter into it in a spirit of cooperation with the taxpayer and the tax agent. Most audits are done in that manner. If they aren't done in that manner, if people aren't cooperative, refuse to cooperate, there are powers in the Tax Act to fall back on. But in most cases, we don't have to do that.
You do have powers of access to private property, don't you?
We have powers of access to documents and information that we need to gather, yes.
And if that was the case of a small business person operating from their home, you do have access to their private home?
We would be arranging an interview with them, yes, at their premises, and that may be their home.
Do you have the powers to pursue that access to demand entry?
I don't know to demand entry. We'd be looking for information if it wasn't given in a cooperative way. And as I say, most audits are conducted in a cooperative way.
You don't see that some people may perceive these powers as perhaps an infringement of civil liberties and privacy?
Well, remembering, John, that audit is about getting people who aren't paying the right amount of tax to carry their fair share of the burden. Those powers are there to back us up, but rarely do we have to use them.
Is it true that your handbook for tax auditors mentions that the element of surprise would be of advantage when looking at a particular business?
Not true.
Categorically?
Not true.
So the tax auditors always give plenty of notice to people of an impending tax audit?
Certainly do. It's part of our interview process. And once again, it's that misunderstanding of what we do, which I've been out and explained already in seminars, but there's so much more to do. 100 agents up at the Madison, I explained to them the interview process, the whole audit process. There's nothing like that in there.
Do you think people are aware of their rights when they're confronted by a tax auditor?
I'm not too sure about that, and it worries me, so much so that I have my own people here looking at putting together a document which I hope to have available in the next few weeks, which explains those rights, and we'll give that to people prior to the audit.
How does the tax office go about selecting those that will be audited?
We do that in a number of ways, John. Perhaps dealing with business here, we should talk about our computer system. And just by way of an example, our computer may look at 1,000 cases for us, and it would select 50 that it says are suitable for audit. We would manually screen those 50 cases to check them out, and then select perhaps 10 of those for an audit. Our experience is showing that in 8 out of 10 of those 10 cases, we are finding tax shortages.
What criteria do you use, though, to select those who will be audited?
Well, there's a number of criteria built into the system based on the industry and the income and levels of profit and things that we expect. But let me clear up a misconception here. People feel that we randomly audit. That process I've just explained to you there shows that we're very particular about the way we select cases. We don't do random audits.
The fact that you don't do random audits may provoke people to say you operate a hit list here in the taxation department.
Not at all, John, because what audit is about is getting people to pay their fair share of tax. So what we're doing is trying to select those people who, on the best information we have, probably haven't paid the right amount of tax.
How effective, in your view, has the tax auditing system been?
It's been very effective to date. Last year, I think nationally, there was $1.2 billion more collected than we anticipated. And we believe a lot of that is through voluntary compliance and the effects of our audits have had.
How do you mean the effect of the audits? How do they get more money?
I just felt under threat being in the ward with this particular patient. It wasn't an easy situation. Despite the fact that I know that I was careful with my own personal hygiene, and that most of the nurses were also very particular about washing their hands, having come in contact with this particular lady. Visitors weren't. Visitors to the ward just came in and went.
At this point, we don't have a problem, but I think if development applications continue to come in as they are now, we will have a problem in the future. I think I'd be advising any developers, if you wish to come to Cessnock, come now. Don't wait 6 months, because it may be too late.
Thank you. It's fine.
You can come in now.
Like many development proposals, plans to redevelop Bar Beach Pavilion have caused a storm of controversy. Newcastle City Council has approved in principle a plan by Newcastle builders Moylan and Sharp to demolish the old Spanish-style pavilion and to replace it with a $4.7 million new building which would have restaurant and public facilities. But the plan has not been well received in all quarters, and tonight interested groups and individuals were given an opportunity to air grievances about the project at an open council meeting. Sharon Grierson from the Newcastle branch of the ALP told the packed council meeting that the Moylan and Sharp proposal that they pay $1 million for a 40-year lease was far too cheap. She voiced concern about what she described as a privatisation precedent and said people in the city were losing control of public land. She said the land was supposed to be for beach users, but public facilities were greatly diminished under the proposal. Speaking after the meeting, Mr McNaughton said council would be taking on board the fears expressed at the meeting. He said it would be making a decision in the next few weeks. He personally was unhappy with having 4 bars located so close to a family beach, and believed the plan was an overdevelopment
and we will be
site.
able to put Newcastle's case and
Deputy Premier Wal Murray today hosted talks with the New Zealand Defence Minister Bob Tizard. The talks involved the Newcastle-based tenderer, Australian Warship Systems, and included a tour of Carrington Slipways. AWS is competing with Victoria's Australian Marine Engineering Corporation for the lucrative contract.
That's the mutual reading. Just try and relax there. Just read the choices on. Just want you to... Just going to change over.
This is a scene which is being repeated all too often in Hunter Valley homes. An asthma attack so serious that the ambulance service is called in to assist.
Good. Just breathe out slowly.
Asthma has definitely taken a turn for the worst, and we've noticed it over these 2 previous seasons. And indeed, over this last season, from autumn through to winter, we've noted here a 400% increase in the incidence of asthma.
400. As well as the number of people getting severe cases of asthma, more people are dying of it each year. This graph compares the Hunter with the Australian death rate expressed as a proportion of the population. Between 1975 and 1985, there's been a steady increase in asthma deaths, with the graph now shooting up, putting us above the national average. Before trying to explain why, we first have to know what we're dealing with.
Well, there's two components. First of all, people who have asthma have twitchy airways. Their airways are overreactive. Then, when something like an infection or a challenge from an allergy or something comes along, those airways tighten up. And when they get narrow, there's the difficulty with breathing, and that's the asthma.
Is it the breathing in or is it the breathing out that's hard?
It tends to be a little more difficult when breathing out, because when you breathe out, you constrict your lungs to squeeze the air out. That squeezes down those tubes as well.
This is the cross-section of an air passage in an asthmatic's lung. When they're having an attack, the walls of this passage react by contracting. The lining swells and mucus is produced. The result is a narrower airway, the obstructions making breathing difficult. And when you feel you can't breathe, you start to feel panicky and frightened.
So what's causing these deaths?
Well, we know that in each individual case it's the same thing, that people are breaking the rules. They're not recognising how severe their attack is. They're not getting help. They're staying at home. They're not paying enough attention to their preventative medications. But why, right now, more people are breaking the rules, nobody knows.
It's not being triggered by something, say dust mites or pollen or the cold weather?
It doesn't seem to be, because of the geographical patterns within Australia, and certainly the same thing in the New Zealand study. The people who were dying were not more likely to be allergic than anyone else. There wasn't a marked seasonality about it, except, of course, in winter with viruses around. If an asthmatic gets a virus, then he's more likely to wheeze.
Any truth in the theory that the westerlies are contributing?
I wish I knew. So many of my patients say they're worse when the westerly blows. Now, I don't know whether that's something the westerly wind brings, or whether it's more related to the fact that some people feel irritable, unwell. In other ways, it may be in a non-specific way it affects their lungs as well.
I'm shooting a young boy.
1 in 10 adult Australians suffer asthma, but still manage to lead normal lives, like NBN newsreader Anna Manzoni.
John, I was diagnosed as having asthma not long after I was born, probably about 6 months of age.
Did it ever get serious?
Yes, it did. When I was about 6, I had a very bad asthma attack, and it was so bad that I did nearly die, and I would have done unless we were able to get a particular drug that had just come onto the market there, and I guess I was a sort of a guinea pig for it.
Well, now you're an adult. Are you still having problems?
Yes, I do. I'm probably one of many adults that do still suffer from asthma, that have had it since they were young. Normally, most people do grow out of it. A lot do grow out of it. In this case, I didn't. Yes, I do still have trouble with it. Not as much as I used to. I'm not as bad a sufferer as I used to be. It has tapered off, but I still have the occasional bad attack.
Does it have any effects on your daily life?
Not really. I try to keep it under control, and I'm much more aware these days of keeping it under control and keeping a watch on it. You've got to be responsible about asthma, and there's no use in thinking that, no, I haven't got it, I can do really what I want to do. That's not the case. I wish it was. But as long as you're careful, no, it really doesn't have much effect on my day-to-day life.
What about when you're reading the news? Any problems then?
No, not really. But I do, I must admit, always keep my Ventolin beside here on the desk, just in case it's needed. Because one of the things that does trigger my asthma is sometimes stress.
So when everybody's going for a commercial break, you might be going for a quick squirt of the Ventolin.
Exactly.
For children, the going's a bit tougher. Instead of 1 in 10, it's 1 in 5 Australian kids who get asthma at some stage. Admissions of asthmatics to Sydney's children's hospitals have doubled in the past 10 years. Young Andrew Considine of Merewether spent much of his early years in and out of hospital. At age 5, he's a veteran asthmatic who, according to his mother Robin, can lead a normal active life, just like any other boy his age. Andrew and his mum use a new product called a peak flow meter. This measures his lung capacity, detects any problems early, and allows for the accurate adjustment of medication.
For him, weather changes can affect him, and of course with winter come all the viruses and things, which are one of the worst triggers for asthma. So it is really worse in winter.
As far as you're concerned, are there any real adjustments that have to be made in Andrew's life because of the asthma?
Not now, not at all, because he's under correct treatment all the time.
What would you say to people who have asthma children? What's the advice that you give as a support group?
I think the more information you find out about it from both your doctor and from groups such as us, the more you feel confident to handle the situation. And you have to sort of have a good rapport with your doctor so that you can have the correct level of medication that is suitable for your child. And yet they can lead normal lives. There's no reason why children with asthma can't live a normal life.
The Constitution is perhaps the most important document in Australia. It establishes the legal base for federal parliament to make laws. In 1901 it was enacted as Australia's states joined to form the Commonwealth of Australia. The authors then envisaged that changes may be necessary sometime in the future and wrote a provision for change via referendum into the document. However, the Australian Constitution has been notoriously difficult to amend. Since Federation, only 8 of the 38 proposals put to the people have been accepted. 4 major questions are being asked this Saturday, each with important implications to the way this nation is governed. The first question asks to alter the Constitution to provide for 4-year maximum terms for members of both houses of federal parliament. The Yes case argues that Australia has too many costly elections and that a 4-year term would allow more long-term planning. The No case argues that this proposal does not guarantee elections every 4 years, as it only provides a maximum. It also claims that the proposal would attack the power of the Senate and give Canberra more power over the states. Question 2 seeks to alter the Constitution to provide for fair and democratic parliamentary elections throughout Australia. The Yes case claims that the Constitution presently does not guarantee anyone the right to vote. It says the amendment will see all governments, state and federal, lose the power to hold unfair elections. The No case claims this is a Canberra power grab, giving the High Court power to intervene in state polls. Further, it argues that this change does nothing to prevent the gerrymanders it seeks to abolish. Question 3 seeks to alter the Constitution to recognise local government. The Yes case argues that this change will prevent state governments replacing councils with administrators, and elected councils accountable to their community would be guaranteed in each state. The No case claims this amendment will give Canberra an interfering foot in the door, and that more power will be given to the federal government at the expense of the state. It further argues that this proposal does not guarantee local government in the form we know it today, but rather a loosely defined system of local government. The fourth question is the longest of them all. It seeks to alter the Constitution to extend the right to trial by jury, to extend freedom of religion, and to ensure fair terms for persons whose property is acquired by any government. The Yes case states that offences against state and territory laws and the number of serious Commonwealth offences are not guaranteed trial by jury, that property resumed by state or local government bodies is given no rights of fair compensation, and that there exists no common law protection of the right to religious freedom. The No case argues that the question is an all or none choice, and that placing the 3 proposals together robs Australians of freedom of choice. It argues that a yes vote would endanger the rights which already exist. A final point. Although the federal government is advocating a yes vote on all 4 questions, and the Liberal and National parties are arguing for a no vote on all 4 questions, electors are free to vote on any question any way they wish.
"18 months ago, Janet Kirsch and Cheryl Longobardi were average Hunter Valley housewives. Today, they are the inventors and entrepreneurs of a product that has netted greater success than either of them dreamed. Being a mother, Janet was only too familiar with the problems of children drinking from the popular Tetra Pak juice cartons. It's easy for a small squeeze to make a big mess. However, once the soft juice packs are in the Slopper Stopper, it's almost impossible to squeeze the cardboard. The original Slopper Stopper idea was discussed and modified between the housewives and their families. They now have a big market for their plastic holder, at one stage selling 8,000 in 3 weeks.
The best way to do it is to actually shopping chain actually making a profit on it and just going back into their coffers. You've actually got real people out there that are using the money themselves for the benefit of the kids in the community as a whole.
However, the Slopper Stopper has plenty of other uses, as the intrepid inventors and their children discovered. The product is completely local. A specialised components company at Rathmines churns out the Slopper Stoppers, and once Janet and Cheryl found their market, it was just a matter of taking the step to invest over $30,000. The former housewives expect to make a profit from their colourful holders before Christmas. Although some members of the team found it hard to get excited, this expanding company from Brunkerville is now looking at cleaning up drinking habits in the United States.
I suppose it is a bit of a gamble, but we've always had faith in the product, and just the test case of getting the 5,000 made up and seeing what the general public thought of them, is the results we've got from that have just been amazing. We know that the people want it.
So how could And perhaps one of the region's better-known inventions, the Snowbee. Now 7 years since the first Snowbee prototype was produced, it's been a long but worthwhile haul for inventor Ray Cashmere. In the last fortnight, Ray and his partners have taken out a sub-licence in the United States with a company that manufactures the Moray boogie boards. They will tailor the Newcastle product to the needs of the American snowfields. The Snowbee has since proven somewhat of an icebreaker for other innovations, and local inventors are now ensuring that future ideas get the support they deserve.
What's actually happening in Newcastle, the Newcastle Hunter Inventors Association has been set up the last 4 or 5 years. I've been involved with that fairly well, so have other inventors, and all the inventors have got together and said, look, you know, we've pooled our resources, our knowledge from inventing, and we've formed our own procedure. And now, in the last 3 months, the Newcastle Hunter Inventors Association has become incorporated, and we look like, hopefully in the next 2 years, to be possibly financing our own inventions.
After learning from the ups and downs of the Snowbee experience, Ray says the most important ingredients for guaranteeing the success of a product is to know what input each person should have in its development, and to think carefully about changing the product to suit different markets.
That's the name of the game. You've got a monopoly on a product with a patent until someone comes along and invents something better. So it's sort of like a horse race. So far the horse race looks pretty good. The Snowbee's out in front.